Well, hi, I'm Steve Podmore, and I'm the founder of Transform Global. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about the bank, Transform Global, and the fund management or asset management arm, which is called SDG 360 Fund Management. So we've already talked about other elements of the bank. We've talked about Hi, I'm Steve Podmore. I'm the founder of Transform Global. And in this presentation, we're going to talk about the bank itself, Transform Global, or the vision for our cross between a multilateral development bank, a commercial investment bank, and an old-fashioned merchant bank. And we're also going to talk about the fund management arm, which is essentially the wholly owned subsidiary of Transform Global. Well, we've already talked about other aspects in other videos, including the Transform Global media and our media and technology properties. We've talked about Transform Global investments in a separate video. We'll talk separately about the actual fund, the SDG 360 Game Changer Fund, in a separate video, and there's other content as well. The highlights of the whole model and also the real fast go through of the whole model, which should be interesting for anyone who wants to get it really, really quickly. And we've also talked about the governance through the Transform Global Trust Foundation. But today we're going to talk about investment banking, or I say today, I'm here on the 5th of January 2022, and I've actually shot a couple of these presentations already. So several of these have been done today. Anyway, so the investment banking operation. So what's the vision? What's the goal for the investment bank part of what we're doing? Well, it's to provide investment banking advice to the whole SDG impact ecosystem, or SDG and impact ecosystem. But it's not to do everything. It's to do the bits that are high leverage, meaning they can be very catalytic and have very significant impact on the sustainable development goals. So we'll be managing and providing investment advice to other funds and helping sometimes invest in them, as you will see through the strategy of the fund, which will enable us to seed and lead other investment initiatives. But it also enables us to raise capital for those entities that can have just really serious impact, directly or indirectly. Directly meaning a high impact business or infrastructure project, indirectly through a fund or a platform type initiative. So that's the goal. It's also to be a placement agent or fundraising partner for those other impact funds, as I've just talked about. It's not just investing ourselves, but it's also through all of our capability, the media properties, the teams to raise money for other fund structures. And of course, to be compensated fairly for our role in that, should we play a role in that. And then the other role for the bank is to raise and co-manage the SDG 360 Game Changer Fund. Now, some elements of the fund, which I'm going to explain now, will be explained in more detail in the fund presentation itself. But when we talk here about a £90 million budget, this is on the assumption that the fund is raised in its entirety That's £9 billion plus the pre-commitment of another 200 million. But the fees will be charged on the net 9 billion size of the fund. And those fees will be 2% per annum of that assets under management. And therefore, that implies £180 million per year. 50% of that, as you can see here, will go to provide the investment banking and operational support for the fund. Now, that will pay for about 265 personnel, give or take, with a number of different roles and responsibilities. And of course, not in one location. This will be in multiple different locations around the world. Now, 265 people is not a large number of people, but it is a significant number when you're looking at others who are involved directly in the fund and the outsourced budget, because there will be an operational budget of a further 40 million. So that 90 provides those internal personnel and an operational budget that enables also property and technology and other things to be provided to those who manage the fund. Now, of course, the bank itself will be responsible for the butterfly basket portfolio structure, which we've designed and you can learn about in the fund video. And the goal basically is to use this ourselves, but also to provide it as an ongoing technology that others who meet certain criteria could also use. We don't want to hold on to everything ourselves. We're very happy for this intellectual property to be used if it's used for the right purposes. So it's really about impact. It's really about doing good and doing well. So all that will sit inside the bank, the umbrella business. And of course, the bank will do other things to what I'm talking about here and separately will generate revenue. So it will own the media platform, Transform Global Media, which will wholly own Big Crowd and funding the globalgoals.tv, unless the strategy changes. But in the short term, I don't see any reason for that to occur. So it will do that and generate revenue as a result. Of course, it will also generate other investment banking revenue through its direct activity and through the acquisitions and investments that we've already talked about. So what we're talking about here is just the part that is related to the fund, to the SDG 360 Game Changer Fund, and the ability to scale that and replicate that model in other parts of the world. So those 265 people, they will include people from the leadership team, the technology team, so that's the information and communication technology, but also the augmented intelligence decision support teams. Of course, the development, that's development of the portfolio and of our network support. So this will be a very active part of what we're doing. Advisory, so there's an advisory team. Distribution, so distribution is about sales and service and fundraising, essentially helping raise capital. That's the placement agency type activity that we talked about, both for the fund, but also for its portfolio companies to help raise co-investment, for example. There's a communications team. That communication activity, some people will be internal and some will be outsourced to our subsidiary, the Transform Global Media component. Impact. So these are the teams that are focused on the SDGs, impact and related research on the technologies and the business models and the funding gaps that there are, and of course the overall impact measurement is clearly a big part of that. Strategy, so that's the innovation and product development that will sit as part of the bank that will also enable us to scale into other jurisdictions. Compliance, that's risk and environmental and social governance. And then operations, so finance and talent and facilities and services. So that's essentially the bank. But the bank, as we talked about, will wholly own its subsidiary. Now, the bank collectively is designed to catalyze the trillions required to deliver what I term intelligent economic recovery and to address the SDGs. But those additional resources that come from the acquisitions and from the transaction income but also the other platform capacity, can leverage everything and can support all the portfolio activity within the fund. But the fund gets managed by a separate entity, and that is what we call the asset or fund management group, SDG 360 Fund Management. And as you can see, it will be wholly owned and a dedicated subsidiary. Now, there's a reason for this, is because we think it's really, really important to enable those who are managing the fund to be fully focused. We want them to be properly supported. Now, another pretty large investor called Tiger Global actually has an intelligent strategy which isn't that dissimilar. Tiger Global does some a lot of market-based investing, and those teams also do private venture type transactions, but they outsource a lot of their activity. So those who are doing the investment support, the investment decision making, they sit and they are focused. So in a similar sense, the people who sit inside the bank, and many of them will also, and much of the provision can also be outsourced alongside the internal personnel that we have. That means those who are doing the investment decision making are focused. So we've already talked about the half of the budget, that 180 million a year. And when the fund IPOs, assuming we hit our targets, the goal is to raise another £5 billion. So those fees would go from 180 million to 230 million per year. And that means essentially the budget would rise from 90 to 115 million. But we would have, of course, a bigger requirement at that point. So at the point it launches, it would be about 450 personnel, although that would take approximately 2 years to build up. Of course, we talked about the bank support, and we've also talked about the incentives being the restricted impact options. So for this fund, there is no carried return. It's designed to fully align all interests on the collective portfolio and to make sure that is integrated, but where it's also governed. So we can't just do late stage investing and all of a sudden turn ourselves into a private equity type investor. It's designed very specifically to do certain things. Now, these are the basic roles. I'm not going to go into the detail of who gets paid what, but you can gather that the chair and the stage CEOs, they get paid more than the associates and the analysts, etc. But the goal is to make a payment structure that gives base that is fair, bonus that comes from performance, but the long-term incentives will come from those restricted impact options. So the design of the model, but also the team, is about dynamic diversity, meaning people will get to be moved in different teams. They get to stretch and increase their capability. And the goal is to make sure that they stay with for a number of years. But if they do, the options that they would normally forfeit if it was carried return in a typical venture type fund, they get to carry with them. Now that happens more if they stay within the family of the bank or the funds that we invest in or the direct entities that we are supporting. But the goal is to have people who sit within the fund management or the bank who really want to be there for many years, delivering massive impact. But we recognize people may wish to move on. So we want to make it fair and intelligent and able for us to continually attract amazing people. So some of those people will be allocated to the early stage investment of part of the butterfly basket portfolio structure. Some will be allocated to the mid-stage investing, and some to the late stage in the butterfly basket portfolio structure. Now, of course, some of those are also doing market, or some of the other groups are doing market-based investing, meaning they're investing through third parties. They're allocating capital into top performing and aligned funds. And we believe because of the relationships with the aforementioned investment banks and the fact that this is designed to deliver incredible deal flow, we will be able to get some proprietary access to those third party funds that we will be doing market-based investing with. Now, of course, the focus is on all of the SDGs, doing all of them, but in integrated manner. So the personnel will have responsibility for water, for example, or climate, but they will all overlap and work together. But it's very important to demark responsibility. Of course, there's a geographic footprint for that geographic diversity and dynamic diversity, so that people inside the bank, they can sit in our regional headquarters. There will be regional headquarters in the different continents, and sometimes 2 or 3 regional headquarters per continent, and then local satellite offices. Now, we're only talking about somewhere in the region of 700 personnel when you take into account the bank and the SDG 360 fund management. But there's an awful lot of additional people that will come, both as part of Big Crowd, the rest of the bank. So we're able to have, and the funding, the globalgoals.tv, we're able to have media presence and banking presence in some of the main regions of the world, and operate always on the ground when we're operating locally, either with partners or with our own personnel. Now, of course, the dynamic diversity includes experience. We need people who are young and very, very motivated to address these issues. And we need people who are older and more experienced but of course, we don't want them too set in their ways. We want people who are still open-minded and really desirous to tackle these truly important issues. And of course, there's an awful lot of sectoral diversity in all of the SDGs. So the design with those 700 or so people is to have coverage of the main sectors, but many partners that can come through the model, because it's really important to say the butterfly basket portfolio structure means that we will, and this is explained further in the business model and the video that explains the fund structure. Because when we make initial investments of £1 million, half of it will go to fund intelligent incubation and development support. And then we make follow-on investments of 4 million, £1 million for those, 3 of cash, and 1 million will go in the form of that organized, thorough, added value and help and support. So it means within a few years, we're spending around about 270 million a year on that ecosystem support. And this is separate to what we're spending with Big Crowd, but it's very closely aligned. So the whole point I'm making here is, even though the teams sound a large number of people, and 700 or so people, is not insignificant, this is increased dramatically when you look at other parts of the bank and other parts of the partnership and ecosystem approach. So that concludes this presentation, talking about both the bank and the asset management division. So do like and share and comment and subscribe to any or all of the social media accounts that you can see. Join me on Clubhouse and discuss with me directly. Ask questions. I'm very happy to take questions on any aspect of this business model, or indeed, please do watch other parts of the model where you can learn more about the vision for the bank. So thanks so much for watching, and I will hopefully speak to you soon.